see who the next guy is. Oh, okay. So our next talk, we're going to switching continents. We're going over to Israel. Not exactly, because Marsha Shumer, who's Jenny Einspruch's granddaughter. Again, the Lavon family was the one I was mentioning, who were among the founders, really, of the state of Israel. And one of them came to America, Jenny Einspruch, and Marsha is going to come and tell us about. Marsha is still here? Where are you? Okay. So Marsha kindly agreed to tell us about. She had to do a little bit of research, but she come up with a nice speech. Okay, and we're going to play a little video also, made by one of the Lavons. What do you want to do first? First you talk and then the video?
Yeah, I think you asked me to speak about the Lavons first.
And then do the video?
And
Okay.
I'll talk about my grandmother.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. As Joel said, my name is Marsha Shumer, and Bernice Shumer is my mother, and she was Jenny Lavon Einspruch's daughter. And Jenny Einspruch was my grandmother. I have one daughter named Laura, and she's here with her husband Shecky, and both of them and myself are all teachers. We live in Southern California. My daughter and her husband live in San Diego, and I live in the San Fernando Valley near Los Angeles. My mother is Bernice Shumer, and she's the daughter of Jenny Einspruch, who was my grandmother. My grandmother's maiden name was Lubyaneker. She was one of 5 children born to a Rabbi Joseph and Leah Lubyaneker in a small town in Austria called Kopitschnik. All of these 5 siblings were dedicated to Zionism. Between 1920 and 1935, 4 of these siblings were living in Palestine. They were some of the original pioneers of Israel. They were instrumental in improving working conditions and establishing a trade union. They built housing for workers and immigrants, and they took 13 and 15-year-olds from the Zionist youth movement in Poland to Palestine to save them from the Nazis. The youngest of the siblings, Pinchas Lubyaneker, was active in politics. He was appointed by Golda Meir to be the Secretary General of Israel. He was also appointed by Ben-Gurion to be his Minister of Defense. When Ben-Gurion appointed his ministers, he insisted that all of his ministers change their names to Hebrew when they went abroad. So in the early 50s, Pinchas met with his family to decide on a Hebrew name. He chose Lavon. 2 of his brothers changed their name to Lavon, and one kept the family name Lubyaneker. We have a video from one of the Lubyanekers who changed his name to Lavon. And he lives in Israel, and he's going to tell you a little bit about all his siblings. As you can tell from the video, all of my grandmother's siblings settled in Israel except her. And she was the only sibling in her family that settled in the United States. The story that I was told by my mother Bernice was that Jenny liked to go to the marketplace with her mother and hang around with the ladies who killed the chickens. And she not only liked watching, she learned how to do it. Her mother was worried that she was going to get into trouble. And they had a cousin who lived in New York that wrote a letter to the family and invited Jenny to come and visit. Her mother was very upset. She did not want her to go. Father didn't know what to do, so the solution was to go to the town rabbi, and the mother and father agreed they would do whatever the rabbi said. So they went to see the rabbi, and the rabbi told them that they should send her. Because she had such a strong will, they thought she would survive. And Jenny promised to return home, but then the World War I broke out, and she couldn't get back. So she left in 1912 for New York. She worked in the garment district sewing, and one of the stories that one of my mother's cousins told me about her was that she didn't have very much patience, and she would sew clothing but she hated to do buttonholes. So Ori's father, Speedy, who also worked in the garment district, would finish all the buttonholes for her, all the clothes she made. My grandmother met my grandfather, Solomon Einspruch, in 1914 at a Zionist club in New York. My grandfather had come to New York from Poland with friends looking for a better life. Jenny and Solomon waited 4 years to save $400 so they could get married. They had a son, Leon, in 1919 in New York. They later moved to Los Angeles because Jenny had a cousin who lived there and bought a house. In 1924, they had moved and settled in San Francisco, where they had a daughter, Bernice, my mother. My grandfather opened his own business on 3rd and Market Streets, blocking and cleaning custom-made hats for men. He was well known and serviced all the better department stores in San Francisco. My grandmother had a good head for business and started investing their money in real estate. Myron Harband, one of my grandmother's nephews, told me there were 3 things to remember about my grandmother. First, she had a heart of gold when it came to her family and others in need. She helped a lot of people. One time she heard from her family in Israel about a father and his son who were in a concentration camp. They made it to Israel but arrived with nothing. Jenny went to all of the members of the family to collect money to send to this father and son. She helped a nephew's wife pay for her tuition to graduate school in London. And she took in Sarah, the grandmother whose life, she took in Sarah, the Harband's mother, to live in her home when Sarah needed help. I remember my mother telling me that when she grew up, my grandmother was always taking in boarders. And the one thing my mother didn't like was that she could never understand anybody that didn't speak English. She knew Yiddish from my grandparents, but my mother talked about having a boarder that spoke only Russian. And my mother used to tell my grandmother that when she grew up, she was going to speak every language so that no one could ever say anything to her that she didn't understand. My grandmother devoted her life to helping Israel. She was very active in the Pioneer Women's Organization, a Zionist women's group dedicated to the needs of Israel. She sold Israeli bonds door to door. She would sell them to anyone who would buy them. Myron Harband told me that she even sold one to the Greek-American mayor of San Francisco, George Christopher. I don't know whether it was my grandmother's skills at salesmanship or her attitude that she would not take no for an answer, but Jenny Einspruch was honored in 1958 for her sales at the 10th anniversary dinner for Israel bonds by Eleanor Roosevelt. And I brought a picture of her with Eleanor Roosevelt up here if you want to look at it later. The third thing I was supposed to tell you is that Jenny stayed in contact with all of her siblings in Israel in spite of the distance. Family was very important to her. My grandmother was very afraid of flying. She never flew anywhere else in the world, but she flew to Israel any chance she had to go and see her family. And the one other thing that Eileen Harband told me, and some other people had mentioned tonight that I meant earlier, that everyone remembers my grandmother's honey cake. I don't know if it was remembered for better or for worse, but they all remember that she served it anytime you came to her house. I'm very proud to be a member of the Lubyaneker family and all of the contributions they made to Palestine and to the establishment of the State of Israel. I hope that you will enjoy meeting each other as I have today. I think I came here today knowing 4 people in the entire room, and I know I will go home with many other new relatives that I never knew existed before. Thank you.